it ties into the difference in my mind between art and creativity that comes from Kali Yuga and art and creativity that is emerging in Dwapara Yuga. And I think everybody here knows about that, right, Aaron? I don't need to go into that too much, or should I say anything?
Well, yeah, not everybody who is part of the conference is necessarily part of Ananda or has the same
So, so
understanding.
what I would like to speak to then is an era that we are in as a civilization, that we are emerging into, that is a time in which what becomes the focus of our consciousness is energy rather than form. And we've come from a period in the past several thousand years when what was really the focus was form. And so in the arts, for example, what we were doing was using the effort and the will and the energy and all that we were involved with in our consciousness towards creating a form. And the form was the goal, the product was the goal. And so art and creativity were taught in a way where what you were actually after was the pretty picture or the final product or the thing that comes at the end of the process. And art in that time period is time primarily decorative or entertaining. Like it exists so that you can make your house more beautiful and you can entertain yourself through film and theater and different things. And that's a lovely thing. There's nothing wrong with that. The world is greatly beautified and enhanced from that. But what is different is that as we emerge into an age of energy, an age in which we begin to see beneath the form and begin to experience from Einstein on the understanding that actually vibrating beneath the hard form is energy and motion, and that what makes an object solid is actually not solid matter, but the whirling of atoms, the energy and motion that creates like a fan blade. You can't penetrate it. It's solid, but only through the movement. And that's actually what's underneath the forms around us. And in this age of energy, we're shifting from doing art and creativity in order to arrive at a form to turning that upside down, using the forms of art, the mediums of art, clay, collage, theater, dance, poetry, pastel, whatever it is. We're using that to actually awaken the energy, to awaken the consciousness. And so in Education for Life, we're opening new ways of thinking and being and doing and approaching the whole of the educational process from a very different place. You're picking the thread up from something that's very at the core of the being. A lot of times people will use the metaphor of the puppet. You know, if you pick up the puppet from the wrong string, then the whole thing falls out of kilter. But if you find that central thread and pick that up, then the whole being has its ability to move with freedom and flexibility and range of motion, and all of the potentiality is brought forth. And that central thread is obviously the life of the soul and the life of spirit. And the arts, more than almost any other arena in life, allow us to access the the core thread of our own being. The arts are actually a gateway into the place within our own soul. And so we engage in the creative process, and through art, it opens our awareness, and we start to experience our inner world given in reflection to us. That's one thing, like just the fact that you have inside of you this energy, you press it out, express it. And when that happens, you're able to have a reflection of that. It also helps you to process what is inside you that is primarily emotional energies. Like all of us as human beings have a enormous range of energetics in our emotional life that we move through on a daily basis. We feel all these different things. And through creativity and through creative response to life, we're able to move the energy through in a way that is cleansing and it's like taking a shower. Like I often think in the future that just as we look back and think how strange that the colonial Europeans didn't take showers, that they that they didn't want to bathe very often. They powdered their wigs because they wanted to not smell bad from having not bathed very often. We're going to look back and think, what is going on with these people that they don't allow emotional energies to be cleansed on a daily basis? And that's what creative process does, actually. It helps us to move the energy inside of us and to actually be released from attachment and involvement in it that makes it actually bound to you. So it kind of seems maybe a little bit counterintuitive, but by embodying, by allowing these energies to be easily brought through and expressed, they don't bind onto us. They don't become stories stitched to us that define us. So for example, if you're feeling an energy that you might label like anger or yeah, let's just say anger. If you have a story about that, then you stitch it to your being. You're like, oh, I'm angry because that car mechanic took advantage of me and he charged me too much. And whatever the story is, you start running the story, and then that energy is stitched to your being as part of your story, and you held it into your psyche. But if you can learn how to let an energy and an emotion just pass through you, it's there and it moves through you, and it becomes a red splash of paint or a dance movement or a sound or a song, then it transforms. It jumps across form. It moves from being something that is encapsulated and storified and consolidated in your being to being an energy moving through you and capable of constantly becoming something new. And so that's another very important aspect of art and creativity, is that they create an enormous place of spaciousness and emotional and psychological health inside of us. They give us an inner resiliency and spaciousness that has that gives us an orientation to come from in everything that we're doing. We have, like that puppet string that I was talking about, we have the alignment that allows other things to move around that core. But there's something else that I think is particularly important in our time, and that is that the creative process, that creativity, which is different from art. Okay, art is beautiful, and art allows us to enter into creativity, awakens and sparks creativity. But creativity is a core skill at the heart of what it means to be human, and at the skill that is increasingly in our time a core survival skill, because it allows you to adapt and move into new ideas, new ways of being that match the pace of change that we are in as a society and a culture. A child entering kindergarten will probably have a career that does not yet exist. The children of this time period are entering into a world that we can't possibly predict. We can't even predict a few years from now, let alone 10, 15 years from now. The world, the pace of change is exponential in terms of invention and forward-moving technology, but it's also, as we know in this era, going through a lot of deep and fundamental changes in the sort of seismic undercurrents, are shifting paradigms, ways of perceiving, whole perspectives through which we view and comprehend our reality are shifting radically. And so it doesn't do us good to teach a child a lot of content. It doesn't help it doesn't help to prepare the child for the future to focus just on, you need to learn these and these and these and these things, these contents, these outer bodies of knowledge, I guess you would say, or the particular skills, or the very specific outward forms. For instance, even in the arts, like the dance step or the particular way of painting. What we have to begin to teach and share and embody is how to go to the place of the creative moment. And creativity in its essence is the ability to come completely into the present moment, so that what you are experiencing and drawing from is not what your parents told you, what tradition told you, what you learned, what happened 5 minutes ago or 5 seconds ago. Creativity is always 100% now, in this moment. And it's drawing from its source of inspiration is drawing from, instead of the past, it's drawing from the future. It's drawing from what does not yet exist.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're painting, for instance, your colors are on the canvas and you're drawing out something that is not there yet. And your consciousness is tuning into not what is or what was, but what is emerging, what is possible and coming towards you. Or as you're creating a new choreography, as you're working with clay, any of the forms of the arts put you in the place in which you don't know, which is also a very important part of being present in the now. You don't know, you're not able to draw on what's behind you, and you are radically receptive and open to what is being brought forth in this moment now. So creativity actually is a zone of consciousness that is increasingly essential in our world. It allows the being to be with the uncertainty of not knowing and drawing from what might be, what could be, what's emerging, tuning in to what's trying to happen, what is emerging. And it's a state of consciousness that's both dynamic and receptive. It's a lot like meditation. It's a lot like energization. Tense with will, relax and feel. Be alert but relaxed. Creativity is a state in which you're creating, you're splashing the color, you're moving the brush, you're doing the movement, but you're also simultaneously listening, feeling, drawing in information from within and from higher sources. And so, in my view, um, it's very fundamental to education for life. The training in being in a creative zone, how to get yourself in that place, how to open yourself as a channel to create to divine energies, because that's one of the things that's also quite different about this way of seeing it. It is not that creativity is something that's like scrunched up inside of you that you have to dredge out. Creativity is actually opening a channel inside of yourself, opening the aperture of your own being, so that a creative energy, a divine creative power and energy can flow. And when that capacity is developed like a muscle, the ability to step into a creative zone, to step into that place of unknowing and receptivity, then it can apply to absolutely everything you're doing. You know, that creativity can channel the answer to a math equation as well as it can a new business plan, as well as it can the exact thing to say to somebody in a counseling situation. It's not as if the creativity gets applied only to the arts. You know, the arts launch the creative consciousness that gets applied to every arena of life. And it is more important than ever before that we cultivate our creative, resilient response to life, because the forms around us are dissolving and changing more rapidly than we can possibly keep track of. And the limits of the rational mind, the limits of the linear left brain thinking mode have been reached. We have to draw from what is essentially a super conscious mode of being, a mode that thinks into, feels into, reaches into what is beyond what the mind already knows. It's beyond what we already did. It's that zone of openness and receptivity to the divine influx of inspiration. And so I feel, obviously, that that belongs at the heart and soul of what Education for Life is offering. And that in all of the subjects that we are playing with, math, science, history, creativity can come to life in that, so that we're not just teaching and sharing, here's the knowledge, here's the blackboard, see the lines, copy it down, this is what we need to know. Rather, we're engaging beings of consciousness in a way of moving into territory that is learning, but that is co-creative, is dynamic, is exploring and receiving, is receptive and creative, in the sense of actually manifesting. So that's a start. It might be fun to just have some reflections or questions. What do you think, Erin?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. My question would be, and others can either type them in, or maybe we'll just, in a moment, just have everyone turn their video back on, would be wonderful, and just come back. And we don't have so big a group that wouldn't be difficult for people to just unmute themselves and ask their own question. But mine would be, how do you create that space, for, what you're talking about? It's not necessarily a particular modality, but creating a space for presence. And so what are ways that you do that for your group, that, your classes that you have, or what advice would you give for teachers that maybe are trying to create that kind of space for children to do that sort of exploration?
Mhm.
What are the times?
Yeah, that's great. So I think one obvious thing is creating the environment that nourishes and inspires, which I think most Education for Life classrooms have, where there's things that are stimulating and wonderful, and there's materials and there's resources, and the game that you're setting up. And I sort of use the word game in sort of a systems theory way. The game of the class is not you presenting this and this and this, but opening up a question or an exploration and resourcing the child or the adult in the classes I'm teaching to follow a creative investigation, to discover for themselves. So when they're doing an art project, instead of saying, okay, now here's the little here's the little target practice. This is what a lot of art practices are, like here's the bunny and here's the ears and the nose, and your job is to get the nose of the bunny in the right place and the ears, instead of presenting things that are asking people to assemble the pre-existent form that you're trying to arrive at, you have the same materials, the cotton ball, the felt, the construction paper, the whatever, and you invite the process of people exploring what can be created there. What is it that wants to emerge from those materials? And one kid might be going, I want to make a rocket ship, and I need something red for the sense of the flame coming out. Well, what do we have? Maybe some tissue paper, maybe some foil. What could we use to create that? And so you're orienting the learning process around a discovery investigation that is resourced. And that is a different approach than a lesson that is delivered and received. So that would be one aspect. Another thing that I think is extremely easy and profound and valuable beyond measure is to access information through other modes of being, and particularly the body, and particularly with children, but with all of us as human beings. If you walk up to a blank piece of paper and say, okay, everybody, we're going to just paint. Everybody looks at the paper and almost universally experiences blank canvas syndrome. Like, oh my gosh, there's this big blank piece of paper. What am I going to do with it? And, if I put this down, then that's, you're trying to create something in this empty space out of nothing. And so in our classes, for instance, we often start with just very simple movement and getting up, opening the body, listening to beautiful, uplifting music, allowing the body to move. You activate the right brain. You go into the place of non-linear thinking, which is spatial and visual and symbolic. And within a very short period of time, 3 minutes of moving to inspirational music, you come to the paper and you have some energy that wants to come through. Like that opens the channel. And then when you begin the process of creating whatever it is, whether it's pastel on paper or clay or whatever, then the energy is already in motion and it just starts to go. There's a very profound thing that Swami Kriyananda shared with us. Energy has its own intelligence. That's amazing to think of that. Energy has its own intelligence. And so if we can awaken the energy and get the energy moving, it knows where to go. It knows what to do. That energy can be followed. And so we actually, along with the lines of the investigation, we cultivate the capacity of human beings, of consciousnesses, to follow the energy and follow the intelligence that's inherent in that energy, follow the wisdom that comes through that energy. Does that help at all or
Yeah,
answer
that's great. Thank you. Yeah, and we do have one question, which is
Yeah,
perfect.
great.
A couple more minutes, so we'll ask you this. If children have nightmares, how can we draw the lesson out of the dream communication or metaphor?
Well,
I
that's
would even expand that question,
mhm.
just in general. How can you help children maybe work with their, maybe something that's going on, or an emotion, like if there's something specific that's happening. In this case, they're talking about a dream or a nightmare,
Right.
how to work with something that is already really physically maybe happening or emotionally happening. Is there any guidance around that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that the fundamental key to that is to have a constant space in your way of being, in the way that you're conveying and teaching, that allows for whatever is present to be brought out without fear. Okay, so like if you are creating a time or a space or a process within your day, within your group, that people can feel an emotion and express it without having it be a big deal, right? I feel angry, now it's red paint, now I've splatted it, now it's through, there we go. Rather than anger, what do you mean? Anger, we don't allow anger. It's a subliminal but powerful effect. So if you have a sort of a policy or way of being in your teaching that has moments in which there is the opportunity to express, and there's a compassionate presence, and everybody can begin to relax, that if today what's present for me is a dinosaur with blood coming from the teeth, that's okay. Like a child can paint that or draw that or express that, and there doesn't have to be like, oh no, not that image, you're supposed to
Yeah,
be
no,
painting
exactly. You don't have
trees and
to.
rainbows and butterflies, what are you
Right,
doing,
right. That's
But if you give that sense of permission,
mm,
then whatever comes through, nightmare or beautiful vision, is going to get the same amount of spaciousness.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe you could talk a little bit, just really briefly, about, and I think this might answer this question more deeply too. Like, once you've created something,
Mm-hmm.
right? Once something has been created, how do you draw the message from that? Because you're talking about, tuning into something that's a different way of communicating and expressing than maybe we're used to. We're
Mm-hmm.
not going to maybe end up with anything that is anything we've ever seen before or familiar with. So, how do you work with that once it's been created to draw from that?
Right. So what we do in our classes a lot is, once the drawing is created or whatever it is, we go back in and embody it and allow it to speak its message. So that's a technique we use frequently. Like say for instance, I've just done this painting and there's this blue misty energy and then there are these yellow droplets on it. Okay, I'm making this up. So we would have an opportunity to embody the blue. What is the blue? Well, as I feel the blue, this is how I feel. And I feel this ocean energy. And now if I embody the yellow, I feel this spretzing energy, this sharp or raindrop kind of energy. And and so you become actually just like fluent in the language of body, psyche, soul, and spirit. You become fluid in the language of being able to express. And so that embodiment might make you recognize, oh, this blue is calming and it makes my heart feel calm when I feel this blue energy. But this yellow is stimulation and I feel excitement and interest when I feel this energy. And so the child or the adult taking these courses begins to just feel very comfortable with, this expression resonates or evokes or allows me to feel this energy.
Mm-hmm.
And so and the more you do that, the more these many different energies are just like colors on a palette. And none of them become sticky points that we're either afraid of or retracting from, or that we're attaching onto. It's actually quite yogic. I mean, really, it's about overcoming like and dislike, desire and aversion. You're coming to a place where all of the energies are just held in compassionate embrace. But as you were speaking to, it's embodying them that helps bring out the message.
Great. Yeah, that's wonderful. What a beautiful kind of cyclical practice to kind of allow that to be embodied and then to draw back in from that what you've created. Um, so it is 8 o'clock, so I want to honor our time. And if anybody has questions, Dana's email is in the chat box, dana@awakeningarts.com, as well as her website, awakeningartsacademy.com. And if you haven't had the chance to take a class with Dana, do it immediately. That's just my own personal recommendation. She didn't tell me to say that at all. I didn't tell her I would. I just think for every teacher, for every being, but especially for teachers, if you are at all interested by what she was talking about and curious about what that might be like to experience, it's a really powerful process just for you personally as a teacher. Because a lot of what you're talking about is what you have to do in the classroom. Wow, there's a lot of unknown energy, and how do I work with all this, and how do I speak the language of energy in the classroom? That's what we're
Yeah.
trying to do. So it's really can be helpful to get that training in other ways,
Yeah.
and really cultivate our own creativity as teachers. So you have some classes that are happening online now, so anybody anywhere can hop on and tune in. So
That's right.
definitely check that out. I would highly recommend it. So thank you so much, Dana. How do you help children move from always creating a thing to creating something more from a feeling space?
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
think,
I think, de-emphasizing product all along the way in every subject is a pretty resonant with education for life approach. You're not as interested in the report card or the final finished thing as you're interested in what is the cultivation and development of the soul, what is the cultivation and development of the many unique talents of the individual. And same with doing a creative project. We're not having this art period in order to end up with the picture of the bowl of fruit and the flowers. If we're going to work with a bowl of fruit and flowers, it's going to be to feel the beauty and calmness and allow that to be expressed. It's to start with tuning into the feeling tone. Like an example that Swami Kriyananda, founder of Ananda, gave in terms of the creative process was when he was writing a piece of music that was about Pompeii. And he didn't go to the piano and start writing it right away or have mental ideas about it. He started by feeling the energy that was involved with that. So he took time to reflect on Pompeii as a tremendous tragedy and the intensity of it, and the fact that so many people died suddenly and a whole village was just frozen in time, and how radically intense that was. Then he took time to reflect on the fact that that happened a long time ago and time had seasoned it, and it wasn't just yesterday that this happened, and it had a mellowing effect on that energy. So he spent a good amount of time and attention feeling into Pompeii. Then he goes to the piano and allows energy to move through. And so similarly, in anything we're doing, when we're creating, let's first spend that time feeling and exploring and allowing that sort of saturation time with the energy, and allow the what flows out of it to be an interesting reflection. But the work, the creativity, the attention that we're actually concerned with is the creative process. That's this big, huge movement of energy from the exploration to the making to the end. And the product at the end is just one little part of that, like the leaf that falls from the tree. It's the artifact in a sense. And what is actually really the value is the sap of the tree of life, its prana, its life force energy. And it can make 1,000 leaves. And today the leaf is red and tomorrow it's green. You know, the forms are not the story.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that helps, but spending time in the place that taps into the energy. I loved what you said, Erin, of we're learning the language of energy, because that's really what this is. We're learning to speak, experience, perceive, we're becoming fluent in
Yeah.
the language of energy.
Yeah, it's like anything. You just have to practice. I think, even as teachers practicing, how do we just get in the habit of de-emphasizing, rather than de-emphasizing the product, how to just emphasize the process, the feeling process that you're talking about more. And just
Right.
giving them, I think, if I'm thinking of Nirani, like, you have students who are just used to that. I'm sure you have students too, adult students, who are just used to like being product oriented, and they get very frustrated by that, having to,
Mm-hmm.
the process, they can't stand it. And so just giving them practice, it sounds like, is a really great
Mm-hmm.
starting place. Irene had a
Yeah,
question. Irene, do
and
you want
like
to?
also like when you have a picture, like just by habit we go. So we say to the child has a little picture. I'm just using this little card. You can't even hardly see it, but like, and our habit culturally is to go, oh, that's nice. What have you made? Is it a snowflake? Is it a pom pom? What have you created? So you're actually asking questions in relationship to the product, right? Switch it just to ask questions in relationship to the process. Wow, how did that feel as you were creating that? What kind of energy do you experience in that? Or what do you feel when you with this gold here? How does this pink feel? So that you're making the questions in relationship to the consciousness and the process, rather than what appears as the final end. And that's the same, that kind of ties back to the nightmare. Okay, like let's say the nightmare is a vampire, right? If we're always thinking about product or the form, then the vampire is pretty scary, right? I mean, it's frightening. But if you think, okay, vampire, so what is that vampire energy? What is it? And you play with it, and the vampire might just be a meaty part, right? So that as you embody it or as you explore it, and allow and say to the child, let's explore that energy. What does it feel like? And we go, I just want to take and take and take and take. And all of us have some part of us that wants to grab and take and take and take, the vampire part of us. And so it's partly being playful with the energies that are involved in our consciousness, and recognizing we're all going to have this great range of energies, that some days are sad, some days are agitated. And if we can know and feel that we are the sky and these are the clouds, we are the spaciousness, and our thoughts and our feelings are the variable comings and goings. And so the more we can speak to and question and explore and hold space for the blue sky, and have everyone feel relaxed that whatever floats through that is fine. We don't worry about it because we're not grabbing it. We're not either avoiding it or holding on to it. The two things that will stick it to us, attachment, is both rejection and grabbing on.
Thank you, Dana. I think it sounds like every time you speak, it's like, oh, we just need to practice these things.
Yeah.
Tandava, you got your hand up.
Um, so how does technique factor into this eventually? Because I'm imagining if you give a kid a violin for the first time and tell him to express the energies inside himself, he's going to express a screechy, squawky sound, because that's how violins work. You can get away with more in painting because you can call it abstract as opposed to just bad. But you know, if you hand me an unfamiliar medium, I'm not going to feel like I'm expressing myself necessarily if I can't get what I want to have happen. And practicing techniques and drawing the bowl of fruit, it trains your eye, it trains your observation, it trains your hand-eye coordination. You learn how to bring these things out more fully and more accurately and more completely. So where does that bit come back in?
Hmm. Well, I don't think we eliminate it because that's part of the picture, you know. Singing in the choir requires sensitivity to everyone else, not just, I feel like expressing myself. What I'm addressing is that our society pretty much has that side down, and we don't have a lot of space for this other. And so the way I view it as, like, say for myself as a painter, I paint paintings that I sell and that are refined, and I spend a lot of time working on something that is a product that's going to go on somebody's wall, right? But I give myself time as an artist to be in the process that nourishes soul connection and allows the inspirations to come from deeper and higher places, so that then when I enter into the refinement process, I'm sourcing it from my origin, from originality, which is the deepest and highest place inside of us. And so I think it's part of the roundedness of what we're doing. So for sure, when you hand a violin, you're teaching something very precious, that you have to learn how to use it. And even in some of the ways in which we use the simple art materials of paint and clay, you have to learn how to take care of the brushes. You have to learn how to wash them well afterwards. And so you learn the caretaking and the refinement of the process. But it's like you give yourself, like a runner who stretches before a run, or a musician who gives themselves time to improvise as well as the structure of the music that is very precise and requires that concentration. And to be aware, if we're working with consciousness, be aware. Is the exercise we're working with today the hand-eye coordination, the attention, the concentration? Well, then we make that explicit. We're working on concentration now. So we're going to draw the bowl of fruit. And here are some techniques for really honing in on our concentration. And another day, you might work with, we're going to express or explore or feel, and we're working with our right brain, and we're hoping to open to inspiration. So we're going to be more playful and work with the more spontaneous flowing fruitness of it all in any particular way, rather all the way in the right brain or all the way in the left brain. Because I've run across some teaching people who are too far in the right brain and need to come back to the left brain too. I mean, it's not that we all are left brain needing to be right brain. So that's helpful. Thank you, Tandava.